Hey, all you IRONMAN Tulsa and 70.3 Tulsa hopefuls. Grab some popcorn and sit back while we dice up IRONMAN Tulsa 2021 with Alison. Yeah, this was from 2021, but she's got some valuable knowledge on the terrain, climate, and race venue that will help you out. So, prop up your feet and listen up for shizzle.
So this is Brian here, triathlon.com. I'm here with my athlete, Alison Brown. She is fresh. I say fresh, through a few weeks off of IRONMAN Tulsa. You get ready to do local events. I know you're in there with Starting Mission Triathlon with me, all right?
That's right.
So we're crossing our fingers that we're not dealing with more weather on that one.
Right.
Because they've suddenly put rain in the forecast. But we'll digress with the local stuff. But so a little bit of background about my experience with Alison. I've been doing coaching through Triathlon with her. Did we start before it got deferred or after?
We were connected before,
Yeah.
and then I moved to TriDot, I guess, in July
Okay.
last year.
Yeah. So in last year, kind of during the pandemic, I learned about TriDot and then became a coach on there, and then onboarded kind of a my beta group of testers, and you were one of them that jumped in there. So we've been doing that ever since. So yeah, it was interesting. Some people, we took breaks during the pandemic and we just kind of did more of an off season. But I think you stuck with TriDot the entire time, and it's unique as in it kind of knew the races in the background. We kept putting it off, and I don't think we put any intermediate races in between, so it just kind of plodded you along and got you ready for IRONMAN Tulsa. But so give us a little bit more background about yours, since we were only connected since probably around, like you said, maybe last January, first kind of started, and then, started in later doing Triathlon, getting ready for Tulsa. So give me a little bit of background before that about your endurance life and endeavors in the sport.
So most of my endurance background is just in running, and I started doing running training for marathons and half marathons in about 2002, and actually didn't do my first full marathon until 2015, but I did a bunch of halves in there because about the time that I started, I had my second son in 2004, and then just kind of shifting priorities for a long time there. And my training had been a lot of just train for a race, get out of shape, train for a race, take a break kind of thing. Then in 2018, my husband bought me a bike for my birthday. So I started to get into that. Had no history with road cycling or anything. And then I realized, I could get into triathlons pretty easily. I had a swimming background from high school, nothing very competitive or impressive, but I knew the basics. So I started to move into the triathlon world at like the worst time with the pandemic upcoming, and didn't do any events, and started training for Tulsa in late 2019, I guess, early 2020. I had your program, and then once that was deferred, which was lucky for me because with my work schedule, I really had not been consistent with my training. But once it was deferred, I said, okay, I've got a second chance to refocus on this, and moved over to the TriDot program last July, and then stuck with that consistently, and then started the race-specific training, I believe, in February. So that was great. When I first registered, I really was thinking, I'll be able to finish, and maybe it'll be a slog to the end, but I ended up finishing in just a few seconds over 14 hours, and really probably could have shaved 20 minutes off of that if I had been managing transitions and some other things a little better. But I was pretty happy with that, and I was comfortable. I wasn't dead at the end, so it was just an overall really good experience.
So and remind me, have you signed up for your next one?
I have not. Okay. So I can't do this event next year, and that my second son there that I had back in '04 is a senior this year. So he is got some different stuff going on with fall cross country and, who knows what. So got a hard to plan around him right now.
That's very true. Yeah, so like you said, a lot of people are kind of like, well, I think this is a bucket list, and then they go do it, and hopefully most have a positive experience, and they're like, I might have to sign it because I got the other guy that I did one-on-one with Tulsa, or with Tulsa through Triathlon. I think he's already signed up for 2022 Tulsa, and he's looking for more events past that. He thought he was like a one and done guy. So just to warn you, you may get in there and take hold.
Yeah, I would like to do another one for sure. Just trying to find the right one that fits the schedule, and being in Kansas City area, there's not a whole lot really close by. So
yeah, that's
finding ones that are under a 10-hour drive.
Yeah, that's what I tell a lot of people is the beauty of this, especially here in the Midwest, and that's why they put one here in the Midwest. They're looking at Des Moines, Tulsa, Memphis, like one in Arkansas. So that was like there's this big void here in the Midwest of full Ironman distance races. So yeah, that's when it's only three-hour drive to do a full Ironman, it's kind of hard to say no. I mean, this is the closest full Ironman race to Kansas City that they've ever done. That's been a Ironman branded race. They had Redman down in Oklahoma City. Well, that's still a decent drive, but it wasn't a true Ironman branded race. Some people that makes a big deal about it. But so yeah, that I think you can speak to that. It helps you out when it's local, somewhat local like that. You don't have to fly. You just hop in your car in 3 hours and you're there.
Right. Yeah, that was something for me that was important because just the logistics of the whole event are kind of complicated, and I'm a big planner and don't like things to be overly complicated or do things on the fly. So being able to set my schedule, not be at the mercy of airlines or anything like that was great.
Yeah, so, and you just did a good segue into this race. So I'm pulling this up on the screen in the background that you can't see because they wouldn't be able to see me. So this is interesting. I'm going to pull up the bike background, or the bike map in the background here, to demonstrate the point of logistics that this was a 2 transition event. So did that, I guess, intimidate you at all, or were you able to kind of overcome that pretty easily, or?
Yeah, not having done it before, it was just something I planned for with everything else being new. It's just one more thing. So I didn't know what I was missing, but I think it was a little bit easier than some people had made it out to be, I guess. The bus there wasn't too complicated, and having the extra bags and all that. The only thing that was a little surprise to me was that I got my T1 bag back, maybe because I was pretty slow getting to T2. But if I had known that would have been there, that would have allowed me to pack less stuff in the T2 bag. But again, I guess that wasn't a guarantee. It was how it worked out for me.
Yeah, that I can't recall, because I did the race too, obviously, and I can't recall if my T1 bag was back already as well. I mean, and I'll just digress a little bit. That was my 8th full Ironman, and I've done 14 halves. So I've done several races where it's 1 transition, it's 2 transitions, it's 2 transitions and a separate swim start, all kinds of logistics. And I think as far as logistics go, they had this one pretty locked down. Like, they didn't do changing tents, and that's more pandemic related. So, you're there at transition, kind of like a normal transition. So we put our bags actually at our spot, which usually you drop your gear bags, your T1 and T2 bags in a line, and they put them numerically in order. So once you get out of the swim or you get off the bike, you have to run by and grab your bag. Or like they'll yell ahead, and a volunteer will get it and hand it to you. But this is a little bit different, where you run to your transition spot, and there it is. Like, I actually personally kind of preferred that. Did you, I would akin it to more of your traditional triathlons where you're setting up your transition at your spot. Did that work out well for you?
T1 was good. So I wore my kit under my wetsuit, so I wasn't making like a full change there or anything. I had decided I was going to take extra clothes for T2 and then going to make a decision. And at the time I got to T2, it wasn't raining. and my clothes were all wet. So I decided to change my shorts just to be more comfortable. And I just did that with a towel at the bike there. And I thought um, the changing tent might have been a little better to do that, but probably, hindsight, I would have just stayed in the bike shorts or the tri shorts that I had on anyway and not changed. So in that case, then the way it was set up would have been fine.
Yeah, because I think they advertised that if you needed to do a complete change, you could use the porta potties, which I don't know if I touch
Yeah.
anything in the porta potties.
I wasn't doing that. That's disgusting.
Yeah,
So,
it was.
um,
And for the most part, everybody tries to keep it as clean as possible. But yeah, in an Ironman race, it's cleanliness is not exactly first on the priority list. But so yeah, I think that part of the experience probably was what would be different between doing a full Ironman like in 2019 versus 21. And I don't know if I think they did Coeur d'Alene, and that was all outdoor transitions. So that was last weekend. So I don't know, looking forward if the races, they're going to change back to the tents, because it is a little bit for them, that's probably more logistics for them to actually set up a tent, get it all set up, and have more volunteers in a tight little area. Like I said, it's convenient because your gear bag's already, it actually makes you find your spot in transition to drop off your gear bags, and then having it all there is a little bit convenient, but in a transition in the changing tents, there's actually seats and places to sit. So if you want to sit down and do stuff, so I think like you mentioned, coming to a race and this is your first one, and this is the first two separate transition areas. You don't know what you don't know. So for you, it's probably like, oh, there's nothing wrong with that. It's perfectly normal. It's totally acceptable. So yeah, so I was just curious, and I wanted to share that with anybody that was wondering as far as logistics and everything. Like I said, Ironman Tulsa is a little bit different, unique, and I think 2021 probably will continue that same way. They'll just plan on doing transitions out in the open. So if you want to do a full change, you're going to have to probably go to a porta potty or use a towel. I know they make big towels you can probably put around yourself and change, but like I said, I mean, triathlon gear these days are meant to do the entire thing in the gear. So mine's pretty comfortable. I wear the same thing the entire time. Just make sure I have extra aquaphor for the sensitive areas, and after you go on the run, and as long as you're not chafing, it's all good. So we will jump ahead, and so I'm going to go to the swim course. Throw that up in the background while you're going to talk about. So let's start us off. So basically, it was a shuttle from the transition transition 2 area to transition 1. So we got there, we got off the bus. So how was your experience once you got off the bus?
it was good. So I was on one of the earlier buses too, and got off the bus, went straight to my bike and put my stuff with my bike for T1, and then waited there till they called our names to go over to the actual swim start. The only confusing part in there was that you had to wait until they called you over, and then they were supposed to call everybody over by your time, and they started with the pros, and then it was just like a couple minutes between the different times. And so I was expecting that to be a little bit of a longer transition over to the swim start. And there was also a little bit of confusion. I think Mike Riley might have announced to wear your wetsuit over, but the race information had said you can put it on once you get to the start. So I carried mine over. Some people walked over in their wetsuits. And then some people, they were getting off the bus later and closer to the start time. So I think if you were on one of those later buses, you didn't have as much time for that walk. But as long as you got up early and were at the front of the bus line to get over there, you had plenty of time. So it was overall good. The only thing I didn't really like was that there weren't that many bathrooms available once you got to the swim start. And they also didn't have the pace lines set up. So when I first walked into the actual corral to start, I was in like the slowest pace line. And then I ducked under all of them to get over to the other side because I was probably more in the top 25% of the swim times. And I was happy I actually did that because I didn't spend the whole time trying to swim around people.
Yeah, and I'll expand on that. And like I said, I've got the map up here in the background on my screen, so you can't necessarily see it, but people watching this video later can. So when we're at transition, it was probably like a mile walk.
Yeah.
So it was a mile walk on roads. So we do have morning gear bags that you can take with you. So I don't know about you, but I wore. I think I actually just kept on some tennis shoes, but
Yeah.
nothing that you want to lose, or nothing that I couldn't live without, went with me from transition to the swim start. So, like, pretty much I left phones and keys. I hid my keys from my car so I can get back to it after the race or whatever. I didn't bring my phone or anything. So it was basically my swim stuff to start the race, and then just some clothes to keep warm until we got there, and put it in my morning gear bag. So I kept shoes. There's some people that went barefoot and there was no problem, but personally, I didn't want to walk on rocks and stuff for about a mile. So I assume you brought shoes, or?
Yeah. I wore tennis shoes over there, and I actually had flip-flops too. So again, it wasn't completely clear how it would be set up, so I left my tennis shoes with my morning gear bag, and then wore the flip-flops over to the actual corral, which was not necessary. You have to kick them off, so I had these flip-flops on for about 50 yards, and then they were just donated to charity or whatever. You don't get that back, so not a big deal either way, but you just really need the shoes for the walkover.
Yeah, so that's and like you also alluded to, getting there early, I think, is the big key to not be rushed and hurried, because and I just did 70.3 morning 2 weeks ago, so it's kind of similar. We had a little bit of a hike to get over to the swim start, so they called the pros, and then once they start calling people, I mean, it's pretty much they start walking through. Like Des Moines 70.3, they had people with signs that started walking, so at least you could look up and see the sign. But it seemed like Tulsa, they're just calling it out, and then after a while, I think people are just like, whatever, and they just start walking over.
Yeah.
Because it was interesting, they had chutes. They were all parallel to each other. There was probably, 10 chutes? I don't know, probably more.
Probably enough.
But, fastest was on the left and slowest was on the right, but there was no, there were people holding signs, but they're all standing together because they weren't standing in the chutes at the front of their line. So, I think you just nailed everybody's experience. You get in the chute, you're like, am I in the right group? And I moved over a few, and I had some friends that moved over a few, and it was just kind of some, it defeated the purpose of having the actual chutes there. I mean, I guess it was good for coordination once they started taking this out, so only one chute went at a time instead of a mass group of people kind of bottleneck trying to get in. But I think that's one thing that they could have logistically changed a little bit was, at the start of each chute, this is the projected swim times for this group, and this group, and this group, and this group, because I think that would help with the self-seating. And what was your experience like? So we get there, and they wait for each chute to fill up, and then they started us, and each chute would start. So did you feel like you lined yourself up pretty good, or?
Yeah, ultimately I did. Like I said, I went to the wrong one first, and then I was with another woman, and she was asking, what's the pace times here? And we figured out we were definitely at the wrong end of things. So we moved over, and then they were calling on the chute we ended up in as soon as we really got into that one. But I also did like the actual start, with just having 4 people go at a time. I don't know if they'll keep that after COVID, but that worked out pretty well. I hope they do.
And I'll give you my experience. So I did Florida, 2018, I believe. A hurricane moved it to Haines City. So that's the first time I experienced they did it the same exact way. So they had chutes, came up. There's about 3 or 4 of us. Every 5 seconds there's a beat, and then we start. So I think probably, to answer that question, if anybody else watching the video has it, I think that's what they'll do in the future is once you get to that start, there'll be a beep or somebody saying go, and then hold you for 5 seconds, go, hold you for 5 seconds. They did the same thing at 70.3 Des Moines. So every 5 seconds, 3 or 4 athletes get in the water, and basically it's just a continuous stream of people to get them out onto the swim course. And did you feel like it was you were punched up at all on the swim course, or?
Not really. No. That was, something I earlier before I knew how they were going to do the start. As you read about Ironman and hear the stories and all that, you watch the videos like, oh no, this is going to be terrible. You'll get kicked in the face and all that kind of stuff. And with the way it was spread out, that was not the case. There was plenty of room. And yes, I swam into people multiple times and had people swim over me, but nothing that was, it wasn't just like a constant barrage of people hitting you.
And did you feel this course was, for me personally, one of the more, I guess, technical courses, the amount of turns and buoys, and how did you feel? Did you feel like you did okay with sighting? Because, to lay out the background a little bit, I mean, it was raining when we started, and it was raining when we got done, so it was cloudy the whole time. We didn't have to deal with the sun on our faces at any point. But how did you feel like you did trying to sight the buoys and get around the course?
It was pretty good. I mean, the whole thing went better than I expected, being that I hadn't done an open water or triathlon swim before. And with the weather and this being an early race in the season, I hadn't had a chance to even go out and practice. So this was all just kind of like, we'll see how it goes. And I was able to sight everything. I practiced sighting in pools, just drills and stuff, but not with the real buoys. And it was easier than I expected. The turns were pretty identifiable. The only thing that I didn't do that I wish I had, one I hadn't really tested out my watch. So when it's beeping at like 500 yards or whatever, I didn't really know what that was. And then when with the whole course, I hadn't really counted out how many buoys there would be. So I'm thinking like, are we done yet? I don't know I have no idea how much further we have to go. Just keep going. So.
Yeah, I felt like that last turn.
Finally, you just
that last turn, getting in the shore just took forever. It's just like, I'm ready for this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think you kind of echoed my experience. Like I said, this is the 8th full that I've done, and by far the most technical amount of turns and just logistics. But I think being cloudy helped out. We didn't have the sun on our face at any point.
Mm-hmm.
B, I don't know about you, but the water was like super calm. Other than
Mm-hmm.
the jet skis and the boats kind of going around for water safety. I mean, I didn't feel a current. Did you feel a current at all?
No.
So, for people looking for if it's the first time a race and you're worried about currents, you're worried about waves or anything like that, it's kind of in the cove. So even if it was windy, I think being in the cove protected it. And like I said, there's no waves, no currents, nothing to really deal with other than just swimming and making your way around other swimmers and inside the buoys. So personally, and I don't know if you'll agree with that, I think it's a pretty straightforward and first-timer friendly swim course.
Yeah, I thought so. It's also probably always going to be wetsuit if it's in that time of May in Tulsa. So it was a first timer, like, if you'd asked me 2 years ago when I signed up without knowing anything about Ironman, I was more worried about having a wetsuit legal course because I wasn't used to wearing a wetsuit or any of that. I didn't even have one. But now that I've done an event with it, now I do understand how much advantage it actually gives you. So it's not something I would avoid. I definitely go for the wetsuit legal swims.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, even they had a few warm stretches, I think, before we got there. But, I mean, overall, yeah, in Tulsa at the end of May, I don't think you're going to get to a point where that, Keystone Lake's pretty large. I don't think you're going to get to a point where they can't find a spot where they can make a wetsuit legal. They're going to find a spot where they can drop the temperature probe deep enough that they're going to make that thing wetsuit legal. So I think that's a good point, is if, for first-timer swims, make sure you're comfortable in a wetsuit. That way you can take advantage of it in this race if you want to do it, because it helps with buoyancy and it helps with less drag in the water, and it makes you makes you faster for the most part. So that's a good point, is the wetsuit legal portion of that. So we're going to go ahead, and so we're done with the swim, and you get out on the bike. So this is, I think, probably the most, I don't know if you want to call it debated or talked about portion of this race is the bike. So not only we're dealing with, a lot of people talk about the road quality. It pretty much rained on us the entire time.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was heavy, sometimes it was light, but it wasn't severe. It wasn't necessarily storm. It was just rain, and I think we could, in Tulsa at that time of year, you could get a severe thunderstorm, or you can get 95 degrees and a hot, sunny, nasty day. So, in this being the first experience for an Ironman for you, it's a little bit unique because you may never experience this again. This is the first, in my 8, this is the first time I've ridden the course in the rain. So didn't necessarily know what to expect either. So what, how did your bike ride go for 112 miles in the rain?
Overall pretty good, actually. So, I had heard about how rough the roads were, and I was worried about that, but I was also kind of like, it can't be that bad. I've ridden on rough roads. Okay, no big deal. And then we got there and drove the course on Friday, and then at that point I was like, oh my God, these roads are so rough. This is going to be a nightmare. So, I was more worried about it after driving the course, and then when I got out on the bike, I thought, well, these actually aren't as bad as I expected from the drive. So it was kind of mixed opinions on that, but it was definitely a rough course for a very large percentage of the course. And then the rain on top of that made the course a little bit more sketchy than it would have been. And I have ridden my bike in the rain, but I don't make a point of going out for rides in the rain. I don't think it's like the safest thing to do. So I usually ride on the trainer, and wasn't sure how my brakes would respond or how the bike would handle, but I rode a road bike and it was fine. I didn't have any issues. And as far as things bouncing off my bike and losing my nutrition or water bottles or any of that, I didn't have that experience. Kept everything with me. I didn't have any flat tire issues. I did stop and give someone a cartridge just for some good karma there. And, I've heard people tell stories of flatting 5 times, and I just think there's something with your setup that's not good for this course. And, I'm on my stock aluminum wheels and road bike, but I had 23s on my tires, so they weren't like the best for this, but it was not an issue. Again, I was a 7-hour bike rider, so people going a little faster might have a different experience.
And did you change, because that, personally for me, I usually ride 110 PSI, and I think my tires are like 23, but I went down to like 90 to give a little bit more traction and to take up a little bit more of the shock. Did you change your tire pressure at all?
No. So I aired up to 100 and just left it there, and kind of just that I don't want to change anything and do something different philosophy there.
So,
but I'm also a lighter rider, so.
Yeah, and I just wanted to bring that up because, you had a road bike, some people have tri bikes. Like you said, some people flat 5 times, some people, there's a lot of photos after the race of the piles of water bottles and nutrition and bike boxes. I saw everything on the course. So yeah, it's, as long as you bolt your stuff down and make sure it's on tight and firm and make sure your water bottles fit in the cages, I think you shouldn't really have a problem. But, I don't know, for long stretches, I felt like I was riding the rumble strips for, miles at a time.
Yeah.
So I think if you prepare, maybe that's a good test. I'll tell people in the future. It's like, go ride your bike on rumble strips, on the rumble strip on the side of the road for, 5 miles or something. And as long as everything stays on your bike, you're good to go. But,
I know, there's a chip seal area, there's chip seal where they take the paved road and they chip seal over it. And then there's chip seal where they took a gravel road and they just make it chip seal. So there's one near me that's the second one, and it's pretty rough. And I thought this is a bad road, but that road is nothing. That's like a beautifully smooth road compared to the stuff that we were riding on in some of those sections.
So how did you, do with your hydration, your nutrition, and your pacing?
So on the hydration part and the food, I think everything was pretty good through the bike and swim. I didn't take on as much fluid during the bike as I planned, but it was also cool and rainy. And I never felt like, I hit a point of dehydration or anything later in the race. So whatever I did was okay. I stuck with the course Gatorade and drank mostly that, not water, so that I was getting the calories with that. And I used the Gatorade chews or whatever they are, the little cubes.
Mm-hmm.
So that was what I stuck with there. The only thing I did, which was a big thing, was I did not stop eating or taking on fuel soon enough. So when for whatever reason, I kind of felt like I was behind on my plan. But, when I came back home after and kind of looked at how much stuff I ate and drank, I really wasn't, but I shoved a whole nother package of Gatorade chews in my mouth at the run transition. And then I ate like another 2/3 of a package, probably about an hour into the run. And then that was when I started to have some regret about eating all that. So it was nothing that wasn't manageable, but let's just say I had more porta potty stops than I wanted. So that was the only nutrition error I made that, I just got to figure that out a little more. I haven't done one of these. And in a marathon, I've taken on, a few chews here and there, but maybe like one package through the whole race. And I'd probably eaten like 7 of those throughout the bike ride. I probably didn't need that much. So, then on the pacing, my targeted pace was faster than, from TriDot. So kind of going back to the TriDot RaceX thing. It was faster than what I actually rode, but my pace was pretty aligned with what I actually ride on a day-to-day basis, I was a little bit faster than most of my training rides, and here in Kansas City, we'd had a lot of really windy days. I don't think I had a long ride that was less than a 10-mile-an-hour wind out of the south. So on the course, it was actually a little bit better conditions, and I went a little faster than what I thought I would do, and then a little bit slower than my RaceX prediction. But with the rain and everything, I was real happy with that pace overall. The only thing I was mad about was just how long I screwed around in transitions. So, and I stopped at special needs for a long time for really no reason. I mostly just wanted to get my stuff back. Kind of dumb. I don't want to leave these extra tubes and cartridges here. I better shove those in my pockets real quick. So.
Well, hey, like you said, maybe that was your karma coming back to you, telling you, the little voice in the back of your head saying, you don't want to take these, just in case. You never know. But, yeah. I think,
you're carrying 3 tubes, you'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, you hope so. I mean, like I said, there's people that fly it 5 times, and, I did Chattanooga in 2014. Somebody went out and threw tacks on the road for the race.
No.
And there's the lead group of people, they're just everywhere. Multiple flats, and they had to go through, and there were people out sweeping the roads, trying to get off the roads and stuff. But so you just never know. Sometimes
right.
3 tubes will help you out. But so I think you hit on some good points that I just want to make sure that people are aware. It was cool. I mean, I don't think it had gone above 75, 76 the entire day. I mean, It was a little humid, especially it was raining all day, but I think it was a little deceptive to, it was cloudy, it was raining, and, for me, I do horrible in warm weather events. I sweat profusely, and I have to take on a lot of fluids for this. I was pretty comfortable with the fluids that I can take in and not being uncomfortable. So I think for the future, and, people watching this later down the road, planning for IRONMAN Tulsa 22 or 23 or whatever, if it's sunny and warm, then that plan kind of changes. Because, and they can have winds of 25 miles an hour. Like, the weather that we got is atypical, I think, for Tulsa at that time of year. Usually it's either, if it's raining, it's going to be a storm and the rain's blowing sideways, or it's hot and humid. I think we got the better end of the stick in the weather. So I just want people to realize that there may be their conditions may be different than this, but I think you did a good job of acclimating to what the conditions kind of gave you. And like you mentioned with the nutrition and stuff, even after I've done 8 full Ironman races, and even after 8, I'm still kind of tinkering with my nutrition. I mean, Lionel Sanders, you look at him in Coeur d'Alene, injecting his calories in mile 10. He's still, working on it. He's a professional. So there's definitely no shame in the game of saying, hey, looking back and looking at your race and saying, where can I improve? What can I change? What can I do better for next time? So that's, and just kind of recap on the bike, we ended up, it was a 2 transition race. So, T2 is a different location than T1. So, with this race, they take your T1 bag. So you take everything off, your wetsuit, and whatever you wore, and whatever you changed, tie it in that bag, and they brought it to T2 for us. And like for you, actually your bag made it back to the T2 before you did. So I think mine did too. I forget, my bike time's over 6 hours or something, so it wasn't incredibly fast or anything by that any means. So don't count on that is what I think the big thing for that. Don't count on your T1 bag being there and having extra stuff for the run in your T1 bag. Make sure everything's in T2, but there may be the outside chance it needs you back there. Or it could be, in races past, your T1 bag is just like put in a pile and they tie it up with your morning gear bag, and then when you're done with T2, they tie them all up, and then you have to go to this big area where there's a pile of bags, and they get yours out of there. So this is atypical that we would have access to our bags. Or, like I said, maybe Ironman comes back and says, we kind of like this setup, and this is what we're going to keep for the future. I don't know. I think we'll go back to that.
And it's not always good because I know, like I said, I wasn't happy with my transitions. Since I had that bag there, I had my sunglasses case in there, and I didn't want to wear them on the run because it was cloudy and going to get dark and all that. So I'm like, oh, let me just put these away in the case. I'm like, what are you doing? Stop. Just throw them in there. You don't need to put everything away neatly. Let's go. So
Yes,
if
yeah.
you're uptight like me, you might find yourself doing that.
Yeah, and the opposite, I always caution people, make sure, like, I'm of the habit of, I empty out my transition, like I put everything in bagging so it's not floating around everywhere, and I empty out my transition bag on the ground. That way you see everything, get what you need, and then, stuff it back in the bag, because, you're doing a race, and, if you look back, you're like, oh, I missed, sub whatever by 2 minutes, and I could shade that in transition because I put my sunglasses back in the case or something like that. So, I think that's a good kind of awareness lesson. It's like, don't worry about, putting away next thing you leave. Now, I will say, if it's a typical race and they're going to put all your bags together, the volunteers, they're great people, but sometimes they're not taking the most delicate handling of your stuff. So, maybe in that instance, I'll put it back in the case just in case it gets smushed by hundreds of other bags, because they put them in big boxes and then put them in a back of a truck and then they bring them back to transition. But so if you're looking to save time, maybe put your license in the last case. It's always, like I said, good lessons. It's the first one, so you're always getting that good education. So did you feel like the aid stations were put together, close enough spaced apart?
Yeah, on the bike, again, since I wasn't using very much liquid anyway, they were more than I needed. I think I took bottles twice. And then at the run, they were almost every mile, and then there's a couple sections where they couldn't be, so I think they were closer to a mile and a half or 2, but they were good. I didn't need to carry anything other than just my own nutrition that I didn't really need on the run anyway, so I was happy with that.
Yeah, so, and we'll no pun intended, transition to the run. So I had, and background, I worked in Tulsa, I lived there for a little bit for work, and so I ran on these trails and I kind of knew what to expect. So did you like the run course setup?
Yeah. Um, the run was great. I liked it a lot. It was running from downtown to the trail and then the trail twice, then back to downtown for the finish. And, the two loop was very um, manageable mentally. You didn't feel like you were looping around and around and around, whatever. And, but it was also compact enough where, I think they could have a lot of aid stations and volunteers for everything. And the scenery was really nice. There wasn't a lot of hills, other than the fact that you have to run uphill to the finish. But that was okay. I'll take it. Compared to the bike course, did have a fair amount of elevation, so not having that on the run was good.
Yeah, because for people that are not familiar, it is a paved trail system, and it has, on normal days, it's got one side is for pedestrians, the other side is for like cyclists and rollerbladers and whatever. So they shut it down. So it was basically one way on one side and one way on the other. So there's very few situations where we were, passing each other. There was like a little kind of a climb in the middle of it, and then over a bridge type thing, kind of their little grassy green space area, whatever it was. I forget what mile that was, but I think it was a little bit earlier on. So that was the only time I think that we were like, kind of pressed for space, that we were sharing the same lane. But other than that, I mean, because most of the races that I've done usually are on roads and streets where they shut them down for the most part, but it's like a big wide open road. So I mean, besides running through downtown, this was on the trail system. I don't think, to give you perspective, I don't think any other race you'll see this much spectator and support out there. There was plenty of parking, there's plenty of picnic areas, plenty of open spaces, families could camp out there. I think that this run course for the Ironman circuit, I don't think you're going to find many more that are this spectator friendly. Did you come with support crew? Cheer you on?
Yeah, my husband came with me, and he was able to see me probably at least 4 times on the bike, maybe more than that. And then on the run, he was just popping up all over the place. So he brought his bike with him, and even though he couldn't get on the trail, he was able to, cut back to the road and then through the grass or whatever enough that, like I said, every time I looked, there he was. So that was nice, definitely.
Yeah, so that definitely helps out to have your support crew. And like I said, if they're mobile and they bring their bike, I mean, yeah, they could see one spot and then jump on. The road's a little bit busy, so I would caution people, jumping on the bike. It's still like the road. It's off a ways, so you can ride in the grass or something like that. But there's only a few sections that are really like, when you run through downtown to get there, you're kind of open. There's no shade really. But the trail system, I mean, would you agree? There's a lot of shade on there. I mean, regardless, it was cloudy anyway, but.
Yeah, I think it would be good even on a hot day. And that was something I was worried about. It was like you said, it could easily be 95 degrees and humid. I don't think you would be in the full sun because the trail is on the correct side of the river, I guess, for getting shade in the afternoon.
Yeah, so if you're looking for a shady course, this is definitely the spot. So, and like you mentioned, you kind of alluded to your nutrition plan. Maybe you took a little bit too many solids, early on in the run and kind of paid the price. So overall, did you, and we keep going back to TriDot, because they've got their race X and their recommended paces and heart rates and everything. Do you feel like you're able to follow a plan with that, or is this kind of taking whatever the course gave you and how you're feeling, or?
I mean, for me, I was really more just kind of how I was feeling at that point, a little slower, but again, kind of expected that I would be slower than what they were predicting for that. I'm not a extremely experienced full marathoner, and I didn't, I know the whole full triathlon philosophy is really that you build your aerobic capacity on the bike, and your runs aren't going to be as long as in like just a standalone marathon training program. But my one full marathon that I have done is was pretty slow. So even though that was 6 years ago and I wasn't as well trained as I was for this event, I just didn't think that I would be able to carry that pace through the whole thing. And I did fairly well, probably, for about half of it. And then towards the end, I just, that's how it is. I think on a first Ironman, for sure, you're 12 hours into something and you've got to just get done. But I was able to keep running. I mean, I saw a lot of people walking in my time on the course. A lot of the people left were just walking for a while, then jogging. And I kind of kept the marathon shuffle going most of the time. I think I had maybe 1 mile that I had to walk, and then I walked the aid stations. That was kind of my plan. And otherwise just kept, keep going and focus.
Yeah, and I think that you hit that kind of on the head there. It's a key, even if you're walking, just to keep going. And if you're feeling bad, just walk until hopefully you can feel better. Or, and that's part of my strategy is I walk most of the aid stations to make sure that you stop, you get either hydration if you need it, nutrition or whatever you need. And then, towards halfway through, you kind of find out what your training is kind of left you with. And then, like you said, I think there's that wild card of, if this is your first one, and for any Ironman, it's just kind of like you don't know what that marathon's going to be like. You can do standalone marathons until you're blue in the face, but until you do a 112-mile bike ride, especially 4,500 feet of gain, especially on cruddy roads, especially on a rainy, wet day, so where you're a little bit more anxious on the bike with the handling. You really just don't know how that run's going to go.
That's one thing on the bike. My neck was stiff, so when you got to the end, probably the last couple miles, like every time I hit a bump, I was just kind of cringing because my neck had locked up, and I wasn't sure how that would hold up for the run. But really, once I got off the bike and relaxed a little bit, it was fine. So that was a nice surprise. Just wasn't sure what that would be like.
So let's wrap up our kind of your experience for Ironman Tulsa. So you get there, you finish, and you kind of talk about your goals and the time that you got. So overall, I've been kind of asking, it's like, you've already kind of talked about and alluded to that you probably would want to do another full in the future. What, if someone was to say, would you do Tulsa again? Would you do it again?
I would, yeah. My son graduates that same weekend next year, or I'd be signed up. But I would plan to do it in 2023.
Even if they didn't fix the roads?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. So they can't be that bad if people are ready to come back for more. And
yeah.
And I'll say I would have probably looked at doing it again in next year, but my daughter's in 8th grade, so they have their little graduation and promotion ceremony. So I'm not going to mess with the timing on that, and there are other things going on. So that's my perspective too. So that's always good. So overall, I mean, is there anything kind of closing up? Wrapping up your kind of assessment of Tulsa, is there anything that stands out one or the way or the other about the race overall, or any parting, for somebody doing it for the first time that you would say?
I think, if you're a first timer and you're coming into it from a state that's like Florida or Texas or something, I would definitely take the bike training seriously in the hills. I think you'll be fine as long as you prepare for that. And being in Kansas City, our elevations are pretty similar, but that's the main thing. I feel like it was a good fit for me just because the terrain is so similar to what I, am on all the time. But I think anyone can finish it. You just have to really take the training part seriously and train on what you're going to race on, and don't, skip through half your training plan if you're a newbie, especially if you're a older woman who is not got a lifetime of endurance experience under your belt.
Okay, well, there you hear it from first timer and one of my athletes, Alison Brown, who did Ironman Tulsa 2021. Supposed to do it in 2020, obviously the pandemic had other plans for that, so we finally got it done this year. So I just wanted to kind of talk to a few of my athletes that have done the race, and put them into the course that I have made on my website, so you guys get more perspective, not just from me, you get perspective from a first timer, and you got my perspective as someone that's done several Ironman races. So with that kind of wraps it up for our chat with Alison about Ironman Tulsa. And if you got any questions or anything like that, always send me a message, and I'll gladly answer anything or make more videos if got questions I think are pertinent and other people should hear. So thanks for watching.